Let's talk to Matthew Elliott, who was Vote Leave's chief executive. Evening, Matthew.
Good afternoon.
That warning then from three senior cross-party MPs that sector-by-sector Brexit could take 25 years.
I don't believe it for one moment, and I'm just sorry that some people on the Remain side don't seem to have come to terms with the result, and that's not true for many voters. If there was a poll from YouGov last week which showed that 68% of people in the country now support Brexit and want the government to get on with it. So I just wish that some of the politicians on the Remain side would also get used to the result.
Well, what is it about it that you don't believe? Why do you find it hard to believe?
Well, it wouldn't take 25 years. It'll take much less than that. I think it can be done within the 2-year time frame of the Article 50 process. It's actually quite a simple deal because, of course, the regulations at the moment between Britain and the rest of the EU are the same between the single market. So it's fairly simple to actually agree a completely free trade deal. And let's not forget that there's a huge trade deficit we have at the moment. So it's in the interests of other EU member states to keep that trade flowing.
They are saying, though, that cherry-picking these different parts, that there'll be losers because almost all sections are linked to the EU. Do they have a point there?
Well, I don't think we should cherry-pick. I think we should be aiming for completely free trade between Britain and the rest of the EU. And
is that possible?
I think it is. If you look at, for example, the Canadian deal, CETA, between Canada and the EU, that goes for almost complete free trade in goods. There's no reason why the UK shouldn't have that deal, in fact, a better deal than the Canadian deal.
The EU leaders, though, saying that access to or membership of the single market is dependent on the UK continuing to accept this principle of free movement. Downing Street then saying that it won't compromise on immigration control. So it's one against the other. And who's going to win out in that?
Well, like I say, Canada now basically will have completely free access to the single market. And yet they don't take part in freedom of movement across the EU. They don't pay into the EU's coffers every year. So I think it is possible to get a deal which will give us that free access, that free trade access in the single market without compromising other areas.
We're facing perhaps another legal challenge. There's talk of a constitutional crisis. At what point do you think the government will have to say enough is enough? And can you see that happening?
Well, the bogus claim this morning that somehow we need to trigger leaving the EEA as well just simply isn't true. We're
Why?
a member of the EEA because of our membership of the EU, so the two go in tandem together. So that's really a red herring in this debate.
Although what's known as you say, the EEA, the European Economic Area, that gives non-EU countries the benefits of the single market, doesn't it? I mean, a pro-EU think tank, British Influence, I'm sure you've seen this, and that's what you're saying about this morning, says it will seek this legal ruling, though, and that it feels confident enough that there is enough legal argument there.
Well, when people voted to leave the EU on the 23rd of June, they're also voting to leave the single market. That was very clear in the referendum debate, both from people on the Leave side like myself, but also people on the Remain side accusing us of wanting to leave the single market, which of course we did. So again, I think they haven't got used to the idea yet that we're going to leave the EU, and they're trying to put roadblocks in the way, and I don't think they'll be successful.
There's the argument, too, that if the negotiations within the EU went badly and no deal looked likely, the UK could then threaten to stay inside the EEA after Brexit. Is half the problem, it's kind of this, if this happens, then that could happen, that there's so many unknowns?
Well, I think we should be optimistic. We shouldn't be thinking of all of these roadblocks. Just think about it. In less than 6 months, we've got to a situation where we've got a new Prime Minister who set up 2 new departments, the Department for Brexit and the Department for International Trade. They're now almost fully staffed. They have a pretty comprehensive plan for what they want to negotiate once they've triggered Article 50. And yes, there are a few hiccups along the way, like the High Court ruling, but I'm very confident still that by the end of March, Article 50 will have been triggered and we'll be starting the negotiations.
Like we had many texts come in for Anna Soubry, we've had a few come in for you too. Dan in Derbyshire says the Canada deal took 6 years.
Well, of course, Canada wasn't in the position of the UK. At the moment, the UK's regulatory system is exactly the same as the rest of the EU. Whereas, of course, in Canada, they had to go through quite extensive negotiations, not only on the regulatory side of things, but also on things like environmental protection and also human rights as well. So it was delayed for those reasons.
Craig in Worcester says, finally someone who's talking common sense, but EU and UK politicians scaremongering over no access to the single market. Canada has negotiated free access to the single market. Are you telling me Canada have agreed open borders, says Craig.
Quite.
Thank you very much for coming on this evening. Matthew Elliott, Vote Leave's Chief Executive. Plenty more text coming in, 85058, for your thoughts on either side of the argument.